So anyway, so you've got a new album coming out in about, well, next Friday, I believe, called
Next
The Old
Friday.
Side of Town. And my understanding is you kind of returned to the music scene after a hiatus of about a decade. Is that right?
That's correct.
So,
yes, been gone a long time, 11 years to be exact.
11 years. So
yes.
what made you decide to come back and start making records again?
Well, after becoming an empty nester, pretty much, I went back home to finish raising my kids. And once the last one left the nest and I was there with nothing to do, I decided, I'll go back to playing music.
Good on you.
Sounded like a good idea to me.
Now, I have to say, I've been talking to quite a few musicians putting out records who are in Nashville. I spoke to somebody named Molly Tuttle yesterday.
Oh, yeah.
But your record was refreshingly pure country. Everybody else is doing kind of their own take on it, and it's all wonderful and stuff, but it was just nice to put that on and go, yeah, I see where this is happening. So
thank you
for that. So is that your intention to kind of stick to the roots?
Yes, I've always wanted to do a country record, and classic country, of course. And I decided, because I had total creative choice with this record, not being on a label, that I was going to do it the way I wanted to, and have lots of fiddle and lots of steel guitar. And somebody said last week that my record sounded like it was the lost record of 1992. And he said, this record sounds expensive, and it sounds like the lost record of 1992. I thought, that's a pretty good quote. That's a good compliment as well.
Yep. I mean, you got the sounds that are happening. You got the pedal steel, you got your fiddle, you got the beautiful piano, the country piano thing going on. I love it.
Yeah, thank you. I like it. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So since it's been 10 or 11 years since you last made a record, how things have changed quite a bit in the music business. How are you dealing with that?
Well, one day at a time. It's quite different. I'm still adjusting, I'm so used to CD sales, where everybody is now getting their music through all the digital platforms, for the most part. And, it's different. It is different.
And then, of course, on top of that, there's the pandemic thing going around.
And there's the pandemic, where we are doing all of these kind of things, from my living room. And, and I'm having to not only be the artist, but I'm having to be the tech guy, so
it's kind of scary.
I'm having to learn all this technology, and it's interesting.
Yeah. So when did you start making The Old Side of Town? When did the songwriting begin and the recording begin?
Well, we started in 2018. That was when I first met with Keith Stegall, and started writing and booking writing appointments, and getting stuff together for this record at that time. And then we went in the studio April 9th of 2019.
Yeah. And was there something, you mentioned that, the kids are grown up, they're out of the house, it's time to do something. But was there something else that made you want to start writing songs again? Were you writing during the time you were living in Louisiana?
I wasn't. No, I guess during those times, I barely even picked up my guitar. The only singing that I did really during that time was some harmony singing at church, now and then. Right. And it wasn't until I got back to town that I started calling on Carl Jackson and Jerry Salley and Larry Cordell and these guys, telling them that I wanted to I wanted to get more into the songwriting craft. I don't consider myself a songwriter like those guys, of
right.
course, but I wanted to get into co-writing because I'm still learning the craft, and just wanted the opportunity to write with as many people as I could for this record. And I'm so proud of the way it all turned out.
Cool. So what was that process like of learning how to write with these folks?
It was great. I mean, most of the songs that are on the record that we wrote were songs that I brought the ideas most of the time. And because I kind of had a theme, to the record that I wanted to, not necessarily a theme, I guess, but I knew I wanted to have a tribute to my dad.
Yeah.
I knew that Way Too Young for Wings. I knew that I wanted to write that because that was a personal story for my daughter. And everybody was just so great, and they welcomed me, in the writing appointments, and would ask me, what do you have in mind? What do you want to write about? And, they would help me along to talk about, like mention the bullet points of certain things, that we wanted to mention, maybe in the first verse and third verse, whatever. And it was a great experience. I really enjoyed it.
Very cool. Now the title track, The Other Side of Town, is a Tom T. Hall song. Is a gentleman.
The Old Side of Town, yes.
Which
a lot of people call it The Other Side of Town, but yes, it's The Old Side of Town.
The Old Side of Town. Sorry, I can't read my own writing.
That's all right. Yes, that is a Tom T. Hall song, and I'm glad I covered that one. That's one of my favorites of his, no doubt.
And you kind of have a history with him. He was kind of your mentor for a while. So what was that like?
Yeah, well, he was actually my employer.
Oh, that's even better.
So I went to work for Tom T. and Dixie Hall out at their house back in 2004, and worked with them until, bye Lance, thank you, worked with them until 2009 when I moved back to Louisiana. So they, I was working out at their house anytime that I wasn't out on the road, and they were great to work for. They became like family to me, and it was just, it was great, of course, being able to watch Tom T. in action every day, and Dixie as well, the way that they would get together and write together, and then they were just so normal, They really were. They were just so normal. And, I remember Dixie Hall telling me, when other artists would come over to their house to be in the studio, for a day or something, she would say, "Now, Alecia, you're, we have guests, other artists coming over today, so I'm going to ask you to help me, with food and things like that, and
yep.
I want you to I just want you to mingle, and just be one of our guests today instead of our employee."
Right. That's
so
cool.
she was very good to me in that sense. And they always thought of my music career first, and they told me that the very first day I went to work for them. They said, "Your music career is your priority. That comes first over your job with us. So when you're not out there playing music, you can come home here, work here." And, it was pretty sweet to have that support.
Cool. Now, I was hoping we can touch on a couple of tracks on the record.
Okay.
And the first one that kind of the one that jumps out to me is kind of a favorite immediately, was "Tell Fort Worth That I Said Hello."
Yeah.
It's, and you
had a fun song.
Yeah. It's got some great fiddle and some pedal steel, all sorts of stuff going on. And you co-wrote it with a couple of other folks. So tell me a little bit about how that came together.
Yeah, so I had a writing appointment that day with Larry Cordell and Kevin Denny, and my first time writing with those guys, and I'd written with Larry but not with Kevin, so our first time, the three of us together. And actually that was the one day that I didn't have an idea, a hook line, or something that I was bringing to the table, but I knew I wanted a country shuffle. At that point, I still did not have a country shuffle for the record.
Yeah.
So after sitting there talking about it for about 30 minutes, what we were going to write that day, I said, "Well, guys, I still don't have a country shuffle. Could we just write a country shuffle today?" And Larry Cordell, he says, "Well, honey, all you had to do was say so. I mean, that's." He said, "I love a good old country shuffle." He said, "Let's just bring Texas right on in the room." So Kevin Denny, of course, sitting there, he came up with the idea with the hook line. He says, "I was doing a show the other day, and he said this couple from Fort Worth was there at my show, and he said I was talking to them, and when they left, he said they were walking away, and I said, "Tell Fort Worth I said hello." And I said, there you go. Sounds like a great song to me. So, and a good Texas song. So of course, the rest is history.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, I love it. Love it. And of course, it wouldn't be a country album without a kind of crying in your beer song, which I guess would be, I might have one too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, which has got, again, beautiful violin and pedal steel with it, but it's slow and sad, this one. So
yeah,
tell me how you came across that one.
Song. That one, Larry Cordell he pitched that to me because he wrote that with Miss Erin Enderlin. I'm sure you're familiar with her music as well. She's a great songwriter, great musician, and he pitched it to me, and I loved it from the moment I heard it. And I brought it to Keith Stigall, and I didn't bring too many other songs to the table, that other people had pitched that I wanted to do, but this was one of them. And I said, I've got to do this song. I love it. And Keith loved it from the first time he heard it. And he said, absolutely. It's a killer country song.
Excellent. Now, one more I'll touch on is the last track. I thought He'd Never Leave. And reason because I think you mentioned Foster Brooks in there, who is from my hometown of Rochester.
Really? Oh yeah, he is.
The last guy I expected to hear his name in a song these days.
In a country song, right? Well, that was Roger Murrah's idea. We were writing that day, and it's actually a funny story the way that song title came about, because it's myself and Keith Stigall and Roger Murrah sitting in Keith's office, and it's my first time meeting Roger, my first time writing with him as well. So we're trying to get to know each other a little bit, just chit-chatting, and about that time, and he's kind of gung-ho, ready to get to writing, Well, about that time, Keith gets a phone call, and he excuses himself and walks out of the room to answer the call. And Roger Murrah looks over at me and he says, I thought he'd never leave. And I said, boom. That's a great line. I said, yeah. I think that could be a great song. So yeah, I guess it wasn't until after we had already written the song that a couple days later, Roger was still tweaking little things here and there, and he called Keith and I and said, guys, he said, I think we need to add Foster Brooks in this line where we were talking about, him stumbling in, drinking.
Yeah.
Like, there's no better person to mention than Foster Brooks. So it was a great idea of Roger's. I have to give him all the credit.
So I'm getting a feeling that you have your kind of antenna up for songwriting and listening out for ideas and lyrics and whatever. Do you keep a notebook, or what's your process like? I
keep in my phone, in my cell phone, I have a notepad in there, and it's just a long list of hook lines or ideas of songs. Because if there's one thing that I'm going to have on me all the time, it's my phone. I keep my phone on me all the time. So it doesn't matter where I am. I'm going to, if something comes to mind, or if I hear somebody say something, or if I say something, I go straight to my little notes there and write it in. Right.
And one of the pedal steel players is Dan Dugmore, if I'm not mistaken, on the record.
Correct.
And I recognize his name because I go back to the 70s and whatever, 60s. Yeah. So he's a veteran, isn't he? What was he like to work with?
He's a veteran. He was great. I mean, I only met him that one day, in tracking, and he was pretty quiet, but love his pedal steel playing, and he was a great guy.
Right. So do you have a regular band that you would normally be touring with if things were normal?
Not at the moment. I don't. All of my touring that I've done in the past has always been bluegrass, and so with a new country record, anything that I'm like adding to the calendar down the road. I'm just pulling in guys that I can pull in from right here in Nashville, to help me out with until we can get a tour actually scheduled, once this pandemic kind of slows down.
So does it feel like you're starting a new career? Because it does. Yeah,
it absolutely does. It's, I guess because of the new genre and trying to put a band together again, trying to get a booking agent, and a tour started, and the whole thing, it's a brand new process.
Right.
So yeah.
Is it fun or is it scary?
It's scary. It really is. I think mostly because, when I started putting everything together for the bluegrass records, I was on Rounder Records, and a lot of things fell into place much more smoothly having a label, a label like Rounder behind me. And with this record, I've done this one completely independent. And so not having the management and the booking agent, all those things went away 10 years ago when I went back home.
Right.
And so it's starting over from scratch, and I'm having to figure it out as an independent artist, and I'm the artist and the label, so it's a lot of work.
And the most important question is, what do your kids think of you being a recording artist again?
They're very supportive. They're happy for their mama, so that's sweet for them.
Excellent. Have you ever been to New Zealand?
I have not, but I want to go.
We got a pretty good Americana country-ish scene going on here, so you'd fit right in. We'd love to see you.
Love it.
So hopefully when the borders open up again, if that happens in the near future, it would be great to see you down here. It'd be great. Yeah.
I would love that. I hope we can make that work.
Well, good luck with the record. It'll be out in about a week or so hopefully good things will happen. Thank you very much for talking to me.
Thank you for taking time to talk to me. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Glad you like the album. Bye-bye. Thanks.